All right. What is the problem with the Vancouver Canucks? So I wrote this video and then I opened Twitter to see all the things that people were saying about the Canucks and particularly about JT Miller after the Preds game. Realized that a lot of what I said in this video doesn't necessarily align with what a lot of people on Twitter were saying, and I considered not making the video. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. We're gonna make it. If you don't agree, you can let me know, but that's the interesting part about talking about sports, right? The Canucks have been front and center in hockey media lately, mostly thanks to a supposed feud between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, but that kind of just seems to be a tabloid-esque cover-up for a longer story that has been about the quality of the Canucks defense. Currently, the Canucks are holding on to a 4th place spot in the Pacific Division and flirting with playoffs, but it's clear watching this team that they have been riddled with various issues that have been working against them. The question is, will those issues be smoothed out in time for a good playoff run, or a playoff run at all? Unlike what sometimes happens, the Canucks' issues don't seem to only be about politics. The team has been riddled with unfortunate injuries that have happened at unideal times throughout the season. The argument could almost be made that their track record in spite of that has been, dare I say it, impressive. And while they're not quite at the point of having any wild loss streaks, the team hasn't been able to string 2 wins together since the beginning of December. So what is going on with the Vancouver Canucks? The first thing that needs to be talked about is the situation with the defense. The Canucks obviously have a prize turkey in the form of Captain Quinn Hughes, who's been paraded out for the 6th longest time on ice per game of any player in the NHL, but he alone does not seem to be enough. Hughes is recognized for his uniquely sharp ability, his hockey IQ, and his skill as a skater. As such, he currently sits with the highest assists per game for a defenseman in the NHL and has a plus-minus of 14. The joint highest on the Canucks roster. All in all, it is undeniable how valuable Quinn Hughes is to the Vancouver Canucks. However, relying on one defenseman is not a sustainable strategy, not least because Quinn Hughes can't be on the ice for the entire 60 minutes, but also just having the options for variation in the way that you play is a very valuable thing for the strategy of a team. Unfortunately, Vancouver's next best defenseman in Phil Hronek saw an admission into the purgatory of injured reserve dating back to November 27th. Hronek had to undergo a lower body surgery and was slated for 8 weeks off of the ice, and despite that, he still eclipses every other Canucks defenseman in assists outside of Quinn Hughes. However, the process of getting a new defenseman to bolster the team's current roster is proving to be a point of great debate, especially considering Vancouver's current cap space of $2.3 million, the remnants of poor financial choices, such as having to pay a certain Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Brock Besser's upcoming end to his 3-year contract extension, currently costing the organization an AAV of $6.65 million. I don't personally find discussions about cap hits particularly interesting, so I'm not going to go too into detail here about the Canucks options, but I would be remiss to not mention the fact that the organization's financial situation is their biggest inhibition to picking up a good defenseman. This largely means that a trade could be on the cards, although no one can decide what that trade should look like. This is where the reported feud between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson becomes kind of relevant, because the argument is that one of these players can be shipped off in aid of fixing this defense problem. So you have outlets reporting that Miller could be going back to the New York Rangers, or that Pettersson could be traded to really any team that has a fan blog written about it, apparently. However, there is a lot of reason to believe that this feud has been overstated, especially after ex-captain Bo Horvat chimed in, and people started shitting on how the Vancouver market is just really gossipy anyway. And just to give my own opinion real quick, I like both of these players. I also don't really care about how they feel about each other. Is it interesting to hear about the inner workings and politics of the relationships in a team? Absolutely. And they're both very clearly different people, but they're also teammates. And whether it means they need to learn how to communicate with each other better or what, I don't know, but they have the same end goal. Also, JT Miller literally has a no move clause, and after seeing his reaction to this drama, I can't really envision the guy just being like, actually, you know what? Yeah, I will move across the continent just to keep these people happy. Another issue that Vancouver are now facing is that Thatcher Demko is injured. I am going to jump in here and say I wrote a whole thing about how it's really concerning, blah, blah, blah. However, it has been reported that Thatcher Demko is slated to be playing in the upcoming road trip. The prospect of Thatcher Demko getting injured is a very concerning one for the Vancouver Canucks, given that he started this season with about 2 months off after sustaining a knee injury, which, you know, in the Stanley Cup playoffs brought a really cool story when Shelovs had to step in for him and did a fantastic job of it, but this is still your star goaltender, and you want him to be healthy, you want him to be well. So it's perhaps not as much of a concern now that we're expecting Thatcher Demko to be playing in the next few games, but it certainly would not have helped with the Canucks' current situation. And Thatcher Demko statistically isn't really looking like the same beast that he was last season anyway. His GAA is vastly different, and I mean, give the guy a break. He's obviously come off of a really difficult time, and I will say that Lankinen has been really stepping up and has been doing really well for the team, but as a general rule, I think you kind of want to keep things fairly consistent with your goaltenders so you're not constantly having to adapt to different players doing these different roles. Because when we're talking about adapting while players are on injured reserve, let's talk about Hughes, Pettersson, and Hronek. Hughes, we obviously talked about, but missing that defenseman who can move a puck like Quinn Hughes can from Vancouver is a real massive gap on the roster. The added pressure onto the opposing team is diminished, and we see way more static defensive setups with his absence. Pettersson has received some flack by fans, but I think the value of his presence can't be understated. Where some complain he is slow and disinterested, I think it can be overlooked how much of a virtue his patience can be, the precision it allows him to shoot with, and his ability to take rebound shots. Compare this with a player like Brock Besser, who regularly plays in the slot and gets goals up close by tipping in the puck, or Connor Garland, who capitalizes on breakaways. We see that Pettersson's style provides variety in the Canucks' shooting options, which can only be a good thing. Vancouver this season hasn't always been the highest shot-taking team in their games, and Quinn Hughes is certainly one of the powerhouses that actually contributes to the shots they do take. Naturally, it helps that he spends more time on ice than the corresponding forwards, go figure, but so far this season, Hughes has averaged 3.2 shots per game to Miller's 1.92 and PD's 1.97, and is miles ahead of any other defenseman whose time on ice could feasibly be compared. The one saving grace to this line of inquiry is that the player with the highest shooting percentage, which is Brock Besser, is still healthy and playing, but still averaging below a point per game. He alone can't be relied upon to save the Canucks situation. Interestingly, Besser's level of threat in the low slot can actually open up opportunities for his teammates. For example, in the Preds game, where the preoccupation with screening him gave rise to a passing lane that offered Pius Suter a great shooting opportunity. The issue here is that you just have to shoot well and hope that the goalie doesn't save it. And with upcoming games being against 3 of the top 6 goalies for GAA in the entire league, that can make these sorts of plays hard to pull off. So the Vancouver Canucks, a team that houses immense talent but seemingly isn't playing to their potential, what's going on? Personally, I don't buy into this idea that it's a Miller-Pettersson problem. Have JT Miller and Elias Pettersson had better seasons in the past? Yeah, but I think it's a scapegoat for other issues that are going on in the team. And this is where I'm going to interject myself, because all I saw on Twitter today, people talking about after the Preds game, was how JT Miller just wasn't engaged in the game, or how he's just waiting for them to trade him away. I don't know how you can argue that he's waiting for them to trade him away when he has a no move clause and when he responded the way that he responded to the media's questions. It's also very true that we don't know why he took a leave of absence in December. We don't know what's going on in that man's life. And yeah, you know what? There can be an argument made that's like, okay, well, this is his job. His leave of absence is over and he needs to have his head in the game. He's also a human being. Maybe that's too nice for a sports analysis, but like, he is also a human being. And then, of course, you have the arguments that come back against that, where people are saying, yeah, well, because Elias Pettersson has always famously had his head in the game in every single game. And you know what? There's validity to that as well. And you know what's actually kind of crazy? Seeing people say that it's in the last few games that we're seeing JT Miller behave complacently, is that if you look at the statistics, it actually shows that JT Miller has been putting more work in. For example, in the last 5 games, 4 of which Quinn Hughes has been absent for, JT Miller's average shots on goal comes to 3, compared to 1.69 for the previous 23 games that he played in, or 1 point per game versus the 0.87 that he averaged in the previous 23 that he played in. Hockey reference. I need to look up a specific stat before I finish this video. It's just come to mind. And you know what? It's not great that JT Miller hasn't scored a goal in 10 games, but in that time, there's only been 3 games where he hasn't gotten any points whatsoever. And I think considering the fact that he's on the same line as Jake DeBrusk, who's actually been, I think he's the top goal scorer for Vancouver right now, I think it's wrong to assert that he's been entirely useless. I also think that JT Miller's playstyle can kind of lend itself that way at times. And in the last couple seasons, there has been streaks of him having goalless games. Not as long as 10 games, but we've seen like 6 game streaks, right? And I think that JT Miller can be a very good line mate. I think he's good at taking different kinds of shots. I think he's good at setting up his line mates really well. Whereas I think of the two of them, do I expect JT Miller or Elias Pettersson to be the person who just makes a very like kind of self-supported play? I actually would put that on Elias Pettersson, and I think that makes sense in the fact that he has more goals right now. My point here kind of being that I'm not in the business of vilifying a player because in the third period of last night's game, they like didn't look fully in it. They clearly hate the team. Personally, I just think that being too quick to decide that we should trade one of these players is really an issue that's born from the fact that the Canucks don't have a strong enough blue line, and they're putting a lot of, you know, Quinn Hughes is being the linchpin. JT Miller and Elias Pettersson are two players who have proven to succeed on a team together. It's not like we only just brought in one of these players and it just hasn't worked. And to that end, I just truly believe that the team can find that harmony again. Is it the answer in a time where there have been issues with the goaltender and his health overall? The second strongest defenseman had to have surgery and was out for 8 weeks and is only just starting to skate again. One of these ostensible star players had to take a leave of absence for personal reasons, the details of which have not been made public. I don't know what the correct answer about who to trade, if that is what the Vancouver Canucks organization decide to do, whether it's Miller, Pettersson, or somebody else. You know what the correct answer was? It was to not fucking pay Oliver Ekman-Larsson the amount of money that he gets paid. That's what the answer was. Here we are. The road trip upon which the Vancouver Canucks are about to embark is going to be really challenging for them. They're up against some of the best teams in the NHL right now. Missing a player like Quinn Hughes, like Elias Pettersson notwithstanding, missing a player with like Quinn Hughes is going to be really hard, especially as I say, you know, they've been playing some more kind of static defensive setups because of the absence of Quinn Hughes. That makes them a lot easier to read. We can see where certain players have improved in some ways in recent times, like what I said about JT Miller with his shots on goal, but also someone like Susie, for example, has averaged 2.4 blocks per game in the last 5 games versus 1.55 for the previous 33 games that he played in. Things I want to see. I want to see some powerful output from Vancouver's first line. I want to see some really good coordination between Miller and DeBrusk, and I think that we've seen that throughout the season, but there needs to be quite an output because we have someone like Brock Besser who, while he's been very successful in scoring goals, he's a little bit more conservative about when and where he does that. If Kiefer Sherwood wants to show the hell up a little bit more, I'm so cool with that. It'll make it fun, at least. I've been enjoying Dakota Joshua Unchained a little bit, and I actually really enjoyed how he was playing on the power play against the Preds. I like that he's using his physicality. If that's a strength that you can lean on, then awesome, that's great. I think ultimately what's my biggest thing that I'm looking for is signs of good teamwork. That sounds really vague and quite lame, but my reason for that being is I think that with all of the stuff that's been spoken about at the moment with the Canucks, proving that they have that adhesion internally, especially on those in that top 6, that to me signifies the most hope. Let me know your thoughts about the Canucks down below. If you think that I am wrong, by all means tell me, because God knows that a lot of people on Twitter would not be agreeing with what I'm saying right now, but that's just how I feel, man. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.